My dear child, I know this might be the hardest story you carry. Maybe you've never spoken it out loud. Maybe it lives somewhere deep inside you, behind everything you let the world see. And maybe, even in your prayers, you keep it hidden. But let me begin here, as gently as I know how. Jesus didn't look away. When you walked through those clinic doors, whether you were terrified, numb, pressured, heartbroken, or just trying to survive something no one else understood, he was there. He didn't turn his back. He didn't flinch. He didn't leave. And he never has. You see, we've made abortion a debate, political battleground, a talking point, but behind every headline is a soul, a woman, a moment, a life, not just the one that was lost, but yours. And that's what Jesus sees. Not a statistic, not a label. He doesn't see you with anger. He doesn't meet you with disgust. He kneels beside the place where your pain lives, not to fix you, not to shame you, but to hold space for you to feel what you haven't allowed yourself to feel. The weight, the grief, the confusion, the silence afterward that no one ever prepared you for. You may have told yourself, "It's over, I've moved on." But sometimes, when it's quiet, it still echoes, doesn't it? The what-ifs, the questions you've never answered, the ache you try to ignore, and maybe you've wondered, if he really knew, would he still love me? My child, he does know. He's always known, and still he chose to stay. This is not a message of shame. This is not a sermon to point fingers. This is a whisper from the God who sees the whole story. Not just the moment of your choice, but the hours, days, and wounds that led up to it. The fear, the pressure, the loneliness, the lie that said, "You're alone and no one will come for you." But someone did, and still does. Jesus is not waiting for you to clean this up. He's not demanding that you prove your regret. He's asking something gentler, something deeper. Can I come close here? Not to debate, not to reopen a wound, but to sit in it with you, to remind you that mercy does not run from pain. It moves toward it. You are not unworthy. You are not too far gone. And this part of your story, the one you've buried, is not where God turned away. It's where he leaned in the most. And right now, in this moment, he is still here. Not on the other side of your healing, but right here in the middle of your ache. Still reaching, still loving, still choosing you. So we're going to take this journey slowly, gently. We're not rushing to fix or explain. We're just going to let him speak. Let him sit beside you. Because the one who formed you in your mother's womb is the same one who holds you now. Not with anger, but with arms that never let go. My dear sister, you've been carrying this for a long time, haven't you? Maybe not every day. Maybe you've learned to function, to smile, to move on. But there's something about this particular ache that never fully goes away. Not because you haven't healed, but because you never really felt safe enough to feel what you needed to feel. And so it stays there, quiet, unspoken, sitting just beneath the surface. You don't talk about it, not really. You might not even let yourself think about it for more than a second. Because when you do, it brings up too much. And the moment you try to put words to it, the world gets too loud or too cruel. Some people reduce it to politics. Others reduce you to a decision. But no one ever seems to ask the deeper question. What was going on inside you? What led you there? What broke before that choice ever happened? You see, we don't just make hard decisions out of thin air. They come from pressure, fear, silence, pain. They come from moments when we feel abandoned, unheard, unseen. Maybe you were afraid. Maybe you were told you'd have to do it alone. Maybe you didn't even feel like your body belonged to you anymore. Or maybe you felt trapped between two impossible options, and there was no space to breathe. That's where the struggle began. Not the day you walked in, but long before that. And even now, long after it's over, something still aches. But you've learned to hide it, to push it down, because you've been told, directly or indirectly, that if you bring it up, you'll either be shamed or lectured or stared at like someone who's unfixable. So you carry it silently, not because you don't feel, but because you feel too much. Maybe you've heard sermons that made you shrink in your seat, or conversations that made you feel like if they knew your story, they'd treat you differently. So you've stayed quiet. You've nodded, smiled, stayed busy. But underneath it all, you're still asking, is there anyone who sees the whole of me and still stays? And my child, yes, there is. Jesus sees every chapter, even the one you wish didn't exist, and still calls you by name, not by your mistake. He doesn't define you by the moment you broke. He defines you by the love that never stopped chasing you, even when you didn't have the words to cry for help. But I want to say something honestly, this isn't just about guilt. For many women, it's not even guilt that stays, it's grief. And grief is complicated. Sometimes it wears the face of regret. Sometimes it looks like numbness. Sometimes it shows up when you hold another baby in your arms. Or when you're lying awake in the dark wondering, what if? You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're human. And somewhere in the middle of that unspoken grief, shame slips in, tells you not to cry, not to talk, not to reach out. And that's why we hide. Not because we're trying to deceive the world, but because we don't believe we're worthy of being held in this place. But you are. You are still worthy of love, still worthy of softness, still worthy of being seen, fully, not just the parts that make people comfortable. You don't have to keep hiding. You don't have to pretend this part of your heart doesn't exist, because Jesus isn't afraid of it. He doesn't flinch when he sees it. He draws closer, not to fix you, not to rush you, but to say, let me into this room. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. And that's where we're going next. Into the eyes of the one who sees you, not with accusation, but with mercy. Not with shame, but with tears. My dear child, you've heard the world's opinions. You've carried the weight of your own silence. You've imagined what God must think of you. But now I want you to stop and look up, not at the church, not at the law, not at the people who've judged or misunderstood you. Look into his eyes, the eyes of Jesus. And I want you to ask, not with fear, but with openness. What does he see when he looks at me? Let me take you to a scene from the Gospels. Not one about abortion, but one about shame. One about a woman, broken, exposed, publicly dragged into the light of judgment. Caught in adultery, the Pharisees throw her in front of Jesus, stones in hand, scripture on their lips. Their goal isn't healing, it's humiliation. They demand a verdict. The law says she should be stoned. What do you say? And Jesus, he kneels. He doesn't shout. He doesn't lecture. He doesn't even look at her right away. He bends down and writes on the ground. The crowd presses in. The accusations fly. But still, he waits. Then he speaks. Not to her, to them. Let the one without sin throw the first stone. Silence. One by one, the stones drop. Feet shuffle away. And suddenly, it's just him and her. Then, he looks at her. Not through her. Not past her. Her. The way a father looks at a daughter he loves more than life. And he asks, not with sarcasm but with softness, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She says, no one, Lord. And he answers, gently, directly, completely, neither do I. That moment is sacred. It reveals the heart of Jesus toward those the world calls unworthy. And that same heart still beats today. That same gaze is how he sees you, not with stone in hand, not with shame in his eyes, but with mercy, with patience, with deep knowing. He sees the pain behind the choice. He sees the girl who didn't know what else to do. He sees the night you cried after it was over. He sees the way you've hidden and the way you've carried yourself like someone who no longer deserves joy. And still, he whispers, neither do I condemn you. He's not minimizing what happened. He's not pretending it didn't matter. He's saying, you still matter. More than the moment. More than the label. More than what they say about you. You are not defined by what you've done. You are defined by the one who refuses to leave your side. Yes, he tells the woman to go and sin no more. But not before he covers her in grace. Not before he meets her with safety, not shame. And that's how healing begins, not from fear, but from being seen. So today, let his eyes be the mirror. Not the mirror of regret, but of redemption. Let yourself see what he sees. a daughter who made a painful choice and still has a place in his arms. Because he is not just watching from a distance. He is here, with you, now. And maybe you can feel it. Maybe part of you is afraid to hope, but part of you is wondering, could he really still want me? Could he still come close, even here? Yes, my child. That's exactly where he wants to meet you. And that's what we'll explore next. Not a command, not a punishment, but a question. Tender, holy question. The kind that Jesus asks when we've run out of strength. Can you trust me? Even here? My dear child, now that you've seen his eyes, now that you've heard what he really says, not what others have said in his name, I want to ask you to sit with one question. Because this is where everything begins to shift. Not with guilt, not with punishment, but with this whisper from the heart of Jesus. Can you trust me? Even here? Not just trust him in your Sunday moments, not just when you're worshiping or doing well, but trust him here, in the part of your story that still aches, the part that doesn't feel fully healed, the memory you still flinch to revisit. That's what Jesus is asking. He's not saying, be better. He's saying, let me be close. Because the truth is, healing doesn't start with discipline. It starts with trust. And trust is hard when you've felt judged. When you've been told you had to clean yourself up before coming home. But that's not what Jesus ever said. In fact, it's the opposite. Remember the story of the prodigal son? The one who ran away, who made choices that cost him everything. When he came back, the father didn't wait on the porch with arms crossed. He ran. He embraced. He kissed the face that still smelled like failure. That's the father's heart. And Jesus, the son, carries that same heart. He isn't waiting on the other side of your healing. He's at the door of your pain, gently knocking, whispering, let me in. But here's where it gets tender. Because this isn't just about forgiveness. This is about intimacy. Jesus isn't only saying, I forgive you. He's saying, I want to walk with you, to sit in this pain with you, to carry what you've been carrying alone. And that kind of invitation, it doesn't demand perfection. It just asks for honesty. Can you be honest? Not with me, but with him? Can you say, even if with trembling, Lord, I don't know how to fix this, but I want you here with me anyway? Because that's what Jesus is really asking. Not for explanations, not for rehearsed prayers, just presence, just vulnerability. And maybe that's the scariest thing, because it means opening a door you've kept closed for so long. It means letting him see the mess inside, not just the grief, but the fear, the resentment, the confusion. But my child, he already sees it, and he's not disgusted. He's not disappointed. He's already in the room. He's just waiting for you to sit down and stop hiding from his love. This is what grace looks like. Not a courtroom, a table, a place where he says, come, you're still mine. And when you finally sit, when you finally stop trying to be enough and let yourself be loved, that's when something begins to break and heal. So, can you trust him here? Even with this? Even with the decision you swore you'd never talk about? Can you let him be a savior not just in heaven, but in this memory? Because this is what he wants. Not just to save your soul, but to hold your story, every part of it. And in the next part of our journey, that's exactly where we're going, into the deeper ache beneath the sin. Because Jesus doesn't just care about what you did. He cares about why. He cares about the wound, the fear, the moment you believed you were alone. And he's ready to sit with that too. My dear child, I want to ask you something now that may take courage to answer, even silently in your heart. When you made that decision, the one you've been carrying in silence, what was the ache beneath it? Because no one wakes up and wants the story. No one dreams of this kind of grief. No one chooses it casually. No matter what the world says, this isn't about carelessness. It's about pain, fear, pressure, loneliness, the unbearable weight of, I don't think I can do this, and no one's coming to help. You may have walked into that clinic because of the situation, but you carried so much more in your soul. Maybe it was the terror of raising a child alone. Maybe it was a partner who disappeared, or a voice in your head from the past that whispered, you're not enough, You never were. Some of us carry the ache of being used, of being treated like our voice didn't matter, our body wasn't ours. Some of us carry the trauma of choices taken from us, pressure we never consented to, circumstances that stripped us of clarity. And others, many others, carry a quiet ache, a long story of believing that we were always too much or not enough for anyone to stay. And that's the wound no one talks about. That's the pain behind the moment, the one that can't be debated in politics or shouted in protests. It's the ache of not feeling safe, not feeling supported, not feeling seen. It's the ache of abandonment, not just by people but by hope. And when hope runs out, we reach for escape, for a way to end the noise, for a way to make the pressure stop. And we tell ourselves we'll grieve later, feel later, explain it to ourselves later. But right now, we just need out. That's not rebellion. That's survival. That's a soul trying to breathe in a world that offered no shelter. And here's what I need you to hear. In the gentlest voice I know how to use, Jesus sees that ache. And he never turned away. He never rolled his eyes. He never shook his head. He never said, "How could you?" He said, I know what you were carrying. I know what it cost. I know what it broke. And I still choose you, because he doesn't just see sin. He sees the wound behind it. He sees the scared girl in the bathroom holding a test. He sees the night you cried yourself to sleep after pretending you were fine. He sees the deep breath you took before you walked in, and the silence that followed when you walked out. And he wants to be there, not just as a savior who wipes the slate clean, but as a healer who kneels in the dirt with you and says, I know you didn't want it to end this way, but I'm not going anywhere. Because underneath every sin is often a sorrow, and underneath the sorrow is a child, still reaching for love. Jesus doesn't just call out your behavior, he sits with your pain, and he waits. He waits for the moment you're ready, not to fix yourself, but to finally let him in. That's how healing begins. Not with a sermon, not with a plan, with a presence. And that's where we're going next. To the one who does more than forgive. To the healer who stays with you until the ache begins to exhale. My dear child, by now you've probably felt it. That subtle shift. Not in your circumstances, maybe. Not even in the full weight of your heart. But in your understanding of who Jesus really is. He's not just the one who can forgive you. He's the one who wants to heal you. Not just your sin, but your ache, your fear, your silence, your sense that maybe you're beyond repair. He doesn't look at you and see a mistake to erase. He sees a daughter to hold. Because healing in the kingdom of God is never about perfection. It's always about presence. And Jesus is still here. He hasn't rushed you. He hasn't demanded explanations. He hasn't asked for a list of promises. He's just been sitting with you, gently, patiently, waiting for your heart to feel safe again. That's what a healer does. He doesn't knock down your defenses. He waits outside the locked room and whispers, "You don't have to be afraid of me." When you remember the night that haunts you, he remembers too, but not to accuse. He remembers to tell you, you weren't alone. I was holding your soul when you couldn't hold anything else. And now, maybe, for the first time, you can feel him reaching not just for your memory, but for the little girl inside of you who just wanted to be loved, protected, known. He's reaching for her, the one who thought she had to be strong, the one who thought no one would stay, the one who never really got to cry. And he's not saying, be better. He's saying, let me in, let me love her, let me take the part of you that still aches when no one's around. This is how Jesus heals, not with a wave of his hand, but with the nearness of his heart. He sits in the quiet with you. He speaks when you're ready. He stays even when you're numb. He holds what you don't know how to explain. And he never once calls you unclean. The world may call your pain a controversy, but Jesus calls it a place for compassion. The world may say, move on. But Jesus says, let's sit here a little longer. I'm in no rush. I love you right here, and you don't have to perform for him. You don't have to weep on cue or prove that you're sorry. He already knows, and he's already forgiven. But more than that, he wants to restore, not just remove the guilt, but rebuild the girl you used to be before shame got in the way. So if your heart is still trembling, if your tears still come in waves, don't panic. Healing is not a race, and Jesus is not keeping score. He's keeping you. And maybe that's all you need to know right now, that He's still here, still holding you, still calling you worthy of love, even with this part of your story in full view. And as we move toward the final part of this journey, we'll listen one last time for the voice that never rushed you, never punished you, never looked away. Just one sentence. But maybe it's the sentence your soul has been waiting years to hear. My dear child, I don't want to end this moment with too many words. You've heard enough of those. Words that accused, words that labeled, words that told you who you were not, and never asked who you were. But here, in this quiet space, where shame has no voice and fear has finally taken a breath, I want to leave you with just one thing, not a command, not a correction, a voice you were born to hear, the voice of Jesus, not from a distance, but right here beside you where the ache still lives. And if you close your eyes, not to run but to listen, you just might hear Him say it. I saw the whole story, and I never stopped loving you. Not just the moment, not just the choice, the whole story, the heartbreak, the silence, the tears you never told anyone about, the night you curled up in bed, wishing you could forget, and the morning you woke up wondering if you ever would. I saw it all, He says, and I stayed. And if you're still afraid that you're too far gone, if something in you still says, but that part of me is unforgivable, then listen even closer. I never left, not for a second. I never will. That's the voice that heals. That's the voice that knows your name. That's the voice that calls you daughter. And it doesn't fade. It doesn't shout. It stays soft, steady, like a heartbeat. So when the world gets loud again, when guilt tries to rise, when someone brings up a verse without bringing up the mercy behind it, come back here, to this voice, this whisper, this truth that will never be taken from you. You are still mine, and I still want you.